Hello friends, it's Jordan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be filming a video that I haven't filmed in a very long time, and that is a book talk, an actual in-depth discussion video about one specific book. It's been a hot minute since I've filmed a book talk, and I hope that you all stay and watch and enjoy, because I have some feelings about a book that I read recently that I want to share with you. I don't know why I turned into a little jingle. Recently I read King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo, which was one of my most anticipated books of the year. I love the Grishaverse, I love Nikolai, I love these characters, I love Leigh, so this was something that I was so anticipating. However, it did not exactly deliver how I wanted it to deliver. This was pitched, marketed, sold, titled The Nikolai Duology, and I personally feel that it is very much not about Nikolai. It's got Nikolai in it, but the central focus of the story is not Nikolai. I don't particularly like the journey that even he goes on in this book. I don't find it particularly compelling. It is a three-perspective book. We do also see from Zoya as well as from Nina. Nina is a character from Six of Crows, and Zoya is a character from the original Grisha trilogy. Personally did not much care for Zoya when we initially met her in the earlier books. She's very mean, abrasive, she's not a very nice person. And Nina was my favorite character from Six of Crows. I loved Nina. Really was excited to see more of Nina and her journey in this installment. I felt that Nina had no business being in this story. I felt that Zoya was the actual main character. We should have just referred to this as Zoya's novel. And I felt like Nikolai was just pulled along for the ride for a majority of it and kind of suffering the side effects of what Zoya was going through. Even though like Zoya's whole journey is influenced by Nikolai's journey, it really felt like Nikolai's journey was influenced by Zoya, because she had such a strong narrative and such a strong and powerful voice that everybody else just felt very overshadowed by her. She definitely stole the show in this book. I also was not particularly fond of the antagonists in this novel. One new antagonist that we got wasn't very well developed. They were very weak and semi-one-dimensional and defeated very easily, and came about very near the end of the novel, like probably somewhere in the second half of the book. They weren't even present for a majority of the book, and then they were just like, oops, dead, gone, defeated. In the meantime, we're still dealing with all of this fallout from these antagonists from the first two series, and it's just like, I get that people love these antagonists, I get that they're very well developed, but I'm ready for something new, and we didn't get anything new. Well, we did, but it was like so lackluster. I also found it to be kind of hard to get into. It had a weird pacing element to it where I didn't feel like anything was happening for a really long time, but then when we did have action scenes, they just seemed to be resolved very quickly. There is a wonderful sequence with Zoya, a training montage, and I love training montages, and there was so much room to talk about that, and there was hardly any talk of that. There's also some fallout regarding Nina and her Grisha powers at the end of Crooked Kingdom. Again, it would have been a wonderful action sequence, but it was wrapped up in like a paragraph, very character focused, to the point where the action scenes that were needed and that were included were basically brushed over. Like, I couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Like, it wanted to be character driven, but it also wanted to have action, and so then the action just like kept suffering for the expense of like the characters. While I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, I didn't like outright hate this book. There were definitely more things that I didn't like than I anticipated. I am still planning to read the sequel. It is only a duology, and I'm hoping for some better things in the sequel. It's a hard book to talk about because it is a series in a longer expanding universe, similar to Cassandra Clare's Shadowhunter universe. However, something that I do really like about Cassandra Clare's subsequent series is there's always a new antagonist, there's always new problems to overcome. Yes, there are motifs and there are things that she does in every single series because it's a staple of her storytelling. But there's always new foes, there's always new things to overcome, there's always a new problem that arises, and I just felt like this book were recycled ideas just for the excuse of writing more. If this story goes in the direction that it goes, like we've been there and done that, I want something new. That's how I kind of felt about this book as a whole. Those are all of my thoughts for the non-spoiler portion of this video. If you haven't read King of Scars, now is the time to leave. I'm going to get into my spoilery thoughts regarding the things I did not like about this book. Goodbye, so long, farewell. Time to get into the spoilers. Okay, so I think the best way to talk about this book is per perspective. Talk about Nina first. I was super excited that Nina was going to be included in this novel. I absolutely loved Nina in Six of Crows, and I love what happened at the end of Crooked Kingdom regarding her powers and her necromancy controlling of like the skeletons and bones and everything that happened at the end of Crooked Kingdom. Such a twist on the Grisha powers, and it like added a new layer to what Grisha can do or maybe shouldn't do, and it added another layer to like this whole Parem issue that they're trying to solve. I was really excited to see that more in this book. However, she almost never uses her necromancy skull powers, and they're like almost never present in a scene. I think she uses them like 2 or 3 times in the whole book, and the one time where it was absolutely appropriate for a huge amazing action sequence with skeletons and dead decaying bodies was resolved in like a paragraph, and I was upset. In the factory ground, all the dead mothers and the dead babies, and they come to attack the well mother. It's so vividly see the scene in my head and how creepy and just like unsettling it would be. And I feel like there have been other movies and things that have done a similar thing like this where someone's controlled like an army of the dead, and she had essentially an army of the dead. It just like fades to black and the one mother dies, and we don't see any of the cool, awesome zombie magic. And that was a perfect place to like show us what she can do with this cool zombie magic, and it was very lackluster. I also like really couldn't care less about anything that was happening in Nina's storyline. Like, I don't really understand why she's exactly included in this book. I was expecting her to be more directly involved with Nikolai, maybe on a mission with him, helping him in Ravka, more direct interaction between the two. Well, Nina's in Fjerda for the whole entire book. She has some characters that apparently were in the Grisha trilogy that I just don't remember, Adric and Leonie. The first portion, she's dragging around a dead, preserved corpse of Matthias to bury him. That was a little much. She's completely tailored. It doesn't even look like her. They're trying to like save the Grisha from the Fjerdans and funnel them out of Fjerda and send them to Ravka to help train them in the little palace, and I just don't really understand why. There was so much crap going on in Ravka that maybe Nina should have, I don't know, helped them instead of been gallivanting through Fjerda. I mean, what is the, if she's rescuing all of these Grisha, are they really going to, like, what is the point? Is she building an army? This whole business with this factory and this like experimenting on these women and their babies and stuff, why? All again orchestrated by Jarl Brum, who is the bad guy from Six of Crows, and I just was like, dude, we've already been there with him. Why do we not have a new foe for Nina to face? It's a new series in a new country, and she's still dealing with the same characters. I don't know. I just wanted something different. I wanted something new. I wanted Nina to tackle a new problem. I was very bored with her Fjerda storyline. For a long time, Nina is just like hanging out at this weird convent. Land called to her, like she could hear the spirits of the dead and they told her to go here. She didn't feel like Nina. She didn't feel like the same character. I really didn't like her romance either, like Hanny, I don't know what her name is. I'm sure she's great and all, but it just felt very, very forced. Like, here is a new love interest on a silver platter for you, Nina. Very obvious to me from the moment that Hanny, I don't know, was introduced, that she was introduced as a love interest to Nina. And I just would have liked to see Nina be on her own a little bit more. Like, Matthias did like just die, which is a little bit too much too soon and a little too force-fed for my liking, which all resulted in just a lot of very boring scenes. I didn't really like anything that was happening for her, and I was just really annoyed with her character the whole time because she felt so un-Nina-like. In contrast to Nina being off on her own mission, Nikolai and Zoya work very closely together, and their storylines are very closely intertwined, to the point where I don't really know why we needed perspective from both of them. Like, I get it, but also like I feel like we could have just had Zoya and it would have been fine, because even though this is Nikolai's story, Zoya is 100% the main bitch in this book, okay? Nikolai present, but maybe not even have a perspective from him, because I don't even think that it was very necessary most of the time, because his storyline was so boring and so heavily influenced by Zoya when it felt like it should have been the reverse. I absolutely loved Zoya's perspective in this book. She was by far my favorite character to read from. Learning about her backstory and how she became so cold and distant and just angry. I loved hearing about her family. It really made Zoya a more relatable, a more interesting, a more depthful, is that a word, character. Portion of this book they go to like this purgatory that's encased in the fold, and she's training with these saints, which, by the way, whenever there's a book with gods and goddesses or saints that the people worship who could have very well been like real people, I'm always interested to learn more about them and their like when they were real people. Saints are very much revered in this world. It's very obvious that they were probably at one time real figures in the world. So like, were they otherworldly and godly? Did they come from somewhere? Were they just Grisha with incredible powers? And I loved learning about that. What actually that they were wasn't very interesting. They're not as cool as you think that they would be. Anyway, so she's training with these saints that come about in the second half of the book and are the antagonists of the story, or are trying to be the antagonists of the story. Well, one in particular, Elizaveta. Zoya's training with Juris, this like dragon man who has melded his psyche and mind and body with a dragon. The training montages are so short, and he's teaching her how to transcend the bonds of her order, her as a particular wind harnesser, to be able to use all the elements, to not even just use all the elements within her one type of Grisha, but also to like reach into the other kind of Grisha, like the fabricators. She was learning how to use every single power from every single Grisha, and it just could have been so much more, and it wasn't. And I was just like, why are we not reading about these incredibly interesting things that are happening? Why are they being glazed over? Why? This is like what makes the Grisha so fascinating, are their powers, and we're like reading about them in a paragraph. I just felt like Elizaveta was kind of a terrible villain. She kills all of her other saint companions, and so like these saints that have been so revered for 5 books now and have been like so ingrained in this society are now like just dead by a woman with bees. Nikolai's whole entire storyline is basically just finding a bride. He's wrestling this monster and looking for a bride, and that's like all that happens. There are a couple scenes where he sneaks out in the middle of the night and becomes the monster and like attacks things. If that's not happening, then everybody else is telling him to get a bride. I don't even know why this book is really called King of Scars. I feel like it's not really very well delved into in the books. Enter this weird 4th perspective, Isaac. Isaac is a member of the Ravkan army. Basically be a stand-in for Nikolai while Nikolai's out on this journey trying to kill this darkness beast within him. He falls in love with this princess from the Shu lands, and then she tries to, well, she does kill him and then tries to kill herself. I get that we needed a character in the Ravkan court to kind of relay what was happening behind the scenes, but why couldn't we have just followed Genya? I really love her as a character. Why couldn't we just have her perspective? I get like why there was this character here, but he was so boring. Every time that we weren't in a Zoya chapter, I wanted to be in a Zoya chapter. So I wish you would have just been reading about Zoya, learning how to embrace this crazy power that she has. And she takes on a new amplifier in this book. She takes on the dragon amplifier, and I wish we would have just like done all of that and everything else would have just been kaput, because that's really all I cared about. And then at the end of the book, it's revealed that the Darkling, surprise, surprise, isn't really dead. This excites me for one reason. This means that if the Darkling is back, hopefully it calls Alina back, which would be fantastic. I freaking love Alina. There are so many mentions of her in this book, so many nods to her, so many comments about missing her, so many friends that she left behind, that it just like feels like very heavy-handed foreshadowing that she's gonna come back. The way it's written, there's no way she can't, and if she doesn't, then that's bullshit and mean. But I don't really want to watch the Darkling again. I just feel like because it's so well liked by the fans that it's almost like fan service. People love Alina and love the Darkling and love their weird chemistry together. Leigh was like, I'll just make him the villain again and I'll bring them both back, and who cares if this is really Nikolai's series, we'll just make it the Darkling and Alina 2.0. I know people are excited about this, but at the same time I'm just really wanting something a little bit different, something a little bit new and fresh, and I don't know, a different antagonist, something not the Darkling related. I mean, on one hand, Alina, and I'm super excited to see Alina again, but on the other hand, the character spent 3 books defeating the Darkling. Alina sacrificed so much. Now I just feel like that whole storyline is negated because they didn't really defeat him. Like, it wasn't really as victorious as it seemed because he didn't really die. I know a lot of fans had speculated that similar to Alina, the Darkling had a fake body and he didn't really die. And look, you were right, but were you right, or did Leigh just take your idea and make it true? On one hand, we have Alina and we have Zoya, whom I both love. And that's where this 3 stars come from, but I take down 2 because I thought Nikolai was as boring as all could be. His storyline was just ugh. And Nina was ugh as well. I didn't like either of them, and they were characters that I loved in their original pieces. I feel conflicted. Also, actually, we didn't talk about the Zoya and Nikolai romance. A lot of people don't want it and don't like it, but I personally am on the freaking ship captaining that bush out to sea. I love Nikolai and Zoya together. I love their bond and their chemistry and their bickering and their banter and how they poke fun at each other. There is some foreshadowing at the end when she makes her new amplifier out of Juris and she makes like bracelets or cufflinks or something. He kind of, in his death, prompted her with a crown to wear as her amplifier, and she was like, haha, very funny, no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, but honestly, who else would be better at leading a country than Zoya? So I'm looking forward to that in the next book, and if that doesn't happen, I'm also going to be equally as annoyed. The next book could either be like fantastic or I could hate it. It seems like there's only one of 2 options here. Tell me in the comments down below what you guys thought of King of Scars. Was it what you were expecting? Were you a little upset about it? Let me know your feelings down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I'll talk to you very soon. Bye!